are stylish, movies great or phony, and how Tony should win and Matthew should win a Tony. But in the meantime, talking about film in the meantime, the Arkin brothers talk about movies.
And the ladies, IDA, yo!
I don't think I'll ever get tired of that new opening.
Well, I don't think anybody else will either. Hey there, everybody. I'm Tony.
I'm Matthew.
And tonight we are going to be discussing the great Time After Time, written and directed by the great Nicholas Meyer, who we have as a guest on the show tonight. We're very excited to be talking with him in moments.
Right. And I'm realizing now that I messed up the cold opening, because the cold opening was supposed to be you and me talking and then the title sequence. But this is a whole new format, so I don't have it down yet.
Well, you messed it up, didn't you? I don't know. Maybe I did.
No, it was definitely me.
You're going to be in trouble with
I have to pop my
gang.
The producers are going to yell at us. Or me anyway.
So we're here. We're actually on now. We're not going to be. The cold open happened. So imagine, if you will, we did a cold open, and then you heard that song and saw that video, and now we're back. Hello, we're back.
Yes,
welcome to the show.
Welcome.
So briefly, I mean, we have a guest tonight that is it's profoundly exciting that we have. Well, really any guest at all when you think about it, but the quality of guests we have tonight is astounding.
Yeah.
So
it's easy to get the guy down the street.
You'd be surprised. I tried to get him. He didn't want to do the show.
He didn't want to do it.
No.
He must have seen it once.
Or just heard of its reputation. But
yeah.
So I don't want to, banter on about my week, which wasn't any different than last week, really. So how are you?
I'm good. Nothing exciting this week. Actually, the highlight of my week was watching this movie again.
I can safely say that's the same for me.
So but I guess I do want to say I did meet this gentleman, our guest, when I was 16. I think I may have met him at our house in Chappaqua. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I may have met him before they started shooting the 7% Solution.
Do you want to clarify any of the things you just said?
All right.
I'm not the only person talking with you.
No,
in essence,
there's other people. All right. Well, our guest, Nicholas Meyer, wrote the 7% Solution, which was then turned into a wonderful movie with our father and Robert Duvall and Nicole Williamson and a host, Laurence Olivier, who
yes.
Some people may have heard of. A wonderful movie in which the great Sherlock Holmes teams up with Sigmund Freud to solve a mystery. And
one of the mysteries being his own psychology,
his own psychology.
Such a great twist.
And I had read that book independently of Dad doing the film, and then was so excited to find out that Dad was going to be doing this movie.
Were you behind the scenes going, Dad, take this one, take it, because this is great?
No, I think he was able to make that decision without me. There was only one time that I said, take this movie, you're crazy if you don't take this movie. And he didn't take the movie. His response to me saying, you have to make this movie. His response was, I don't want to spend 3 months in the Philippines.
Was it Apocalypse Now?
It was The Killing Fields.
Oh, well, you don't want to be in that.
Who
wants to be in that movie?
Who wants to be in that movie?
Good Lord.
Yeah. So that's been the advice that I've given our father and the extent to which it's been taken.
Well, he made a good call to make this movie. I also remember, Nick, from that time. I was probably 10-ish at the time, 9.
Yeah, right about there. It was 1976.
And it was, that was a very important movie set for me to be on and experience, and very memorable time in my life. So I remember Nick as well. I don't know if he remembers me. I was a lot shorter at the time.
I remember so many things from that time. I remember one afternoon, Dad saying, we were going to go shopping. He said, I have to have lunch with somebody. Why don't you meet me outside this such and such restaurant at such and such a time in London? And then we're going to go shopping or go to a movie or something like that. So I'm waiting outside the restaurant at the appointed time, and he comes walking down the steps with an elderly gentleman. And they get to the bottom of the steps, and he says, "Oh, Matthew, you're here. Matthew, let me introduce you to somebody. Lord Olivier, this is my son, Matthew. Matthew, this is Lord Olivier." And
Oh,
I literally, I kind of went, and start like trying to figure out, do I stick out to shake hands or do I
you bow?
do I kneel? I
Did
didn't
you
know what to
curtsy?
do.
You probably curtsied just out of confusion.
Just about.
Yeah.
And Olivier was astounded. He just stuck out his hand. It's like, "Oh, nice to meet you," and cheerio, and pip pip and all that, and he was on his way. But
Yeah.
that was
There are some people on that movie. We just named a few of them. Actually, there are more. There's a long list.
Yeah.
But there are also
Vanessa Redgrave.
Well, yeah,
Joel
exactly.
Grey.
Joel Grey. Yeah, pretty great stuff.
An amazing cast.
But we're talking about it. We're talking about a different film tonight. A movie that came before 7% Solution.
No, I believe it came right afterwards.
Was it right? Oh yeah, I guess so. It was right. Yeah, I have my notes conflated. It was right after. And one of the most extraordinary debut directorial things I've ever seen.
Well, let's bring him on, because who the heck
Please.
wants to hear us babble?
Nobody.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Nicholas Meyer. Hey there,
Nicholas. Hello. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure so far.
It'll get better.
Are you tired now? Has it been?
No, I'm good. I just had a snack and I'm revived.
I'm going to change the format here a little bit so that we're not quite so cramped. There, that's better. We both, Tony and I, had an opportunity to see this movie again, and I remember seeing this movie when it came out and just adoring it.
Thank you.
And loved it as much this time as I did. Actually, I think more, because I know more about a tiny bit more about film now, and there's just so much in it that I appreciated. Tony, do you want to?
Oh, well, I truly, I was obsessed with this movie when it came out. It was probably, I think it was an early cable. It was on HBO or one of the early cable networks early for me. So I saw it over and over and over again. I was obsessed with it. And it got me kind of going as a kid on various things, including some Sherlock Holmes obsession. And then I was very much an Anglophile, partly because of my experiences with 7% Solution. And then with this story, I became a big fan of every actor in this movie afterwards. And I'd seen it, I don't know, 20 times. Coming back to it has been really extraordinary. Do you have warm feelings about the movie? Thinking back on the making of it?
Yes, it was one of the most wonderful professional experiences of my life. I was introduced to a man named Herb Jaffe, who had originally been a literary agent and then became, for a time, the head of United Artists and was now an independent producer. And he became sort of my West Coast father. And that family became my West Coast family. And when I wrote the script, which is probably a story we'll get into, I dropped it off to him, and I said, I'm going out to get some Chinese. Do you think you might be interested in producing this? And by the time I was, finished with egg rolls, he said, "Oh, absolutely."
Wow.
And then he introduced me to his son, Stephen Charles Jaffe, and Stephen was, I don't know, my age, a little younger. He's a little younger than me, And we've been partners ever since. We've been partners ever since.
Wow.
Stephen produced company business and Star Trek VI, which he also was the second unit director of, and he was the second unit director on the day after. So I've had a long association.
Amazing.
Two of them. Making this movie was like an unfurled red carpet that they were frantically unrolling in front of me. I had no idea what they were going through to make this so comfortable and so much fun. And when it was all over and it became a hit, I drew all the wrong lessons from it. I said, oh, making movies is easy.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Was it really easy? I mean, I'm amazed that because in my experience, I've never spent a day on a set that was easy. So I'm just it's astounding to hear.
Easy is a relative term. I'm not saying that there were not a million considerations when you're directing a movie. You have to have the hide of a rhinoceros and the constitution of an ox or something in order to get through it, because it just doesn't stop. And there's egos, and there's weather, and there's budgets, and there's studios, and there are a million variables. But I sort of approached it when I was assembling a crew. I always made the same speech, and I said, I know nothing. So you're going to have to teach me. And you're going to have to not mind teaching me. And then you're going to have to not mind if I still want to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who could withstand this catechism was great, because I was like surrounded by a support system of people who really wanted to help. And one of the things that I discovered, and I discovered it sort of by accident, was that a lot of people who are in a crew are actually good at other things besides the thing that their fiefdom is. When I made movies in Europe, I discovered, if you ask the costumer in an American film, you're looking at what were then dailies, you say, well, what'd you think of the scene? And they'll go, well, the seams were all straight. But there might be other things that they have to offer, but they're typically not encouraged to do that. You do that with Stanley Kubrick and he probably fires you or something. But on this movie, we were shooting a scene and we were broke for lunch, and a man came down from high up in the gators and he said, you're the writer of this thing as well as the director, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, if you're asking me, which I wasn't, he's saying the wrong thing there.
Wow.
That was my next line. I said, wow, what should he say? And he told me. And what he told me was so much better than the piece of crap line I had just shot on Malcolm. And by the way, it wasn't an original line. It was a reprise of an earlier line in the movie.
Can you remember specifically?
Of course I can remember. Anyway, I thought, you're the fucking director. Call everybody back after lunch and shoot his line, which is your line, which is exactly what we did. And I was thrilled because, number one, that man was involved enough to want to contribute to it.
Yeah.
And number two, that he felt comfortable enough to do it. And number three, the movie got a lot better.
Right.
His idea was, which was, just brilliant. And
well, that's real leadership, though, to be able to create that comfortable atmosphere.
Well, I think for me, it's important. Film is a collaborative process, and I assume, sometimes wrongly, by the way, that everybody working on the film is there because they want to be there. And to me, as Orson Welles said, this is the biggest set of electric trains ever kid got to play with. So sure, I love the collaborative part of it. And once, by the way, the word got out, I got all kinds of help, that were outside the purview of what the focus puller did. And I reserved the right to say no. I didn't want suggestions made while I was on the floor while we were shooting. But I was going to get the credit or the blame either way. So if the suggestion was good and I was a beginner, why not take it? So I took his suggestion and I've never regretted it.
Well, that's a great story. The thing about you is that you gave a specific example of this happening. I've heard people say this before, but I think you have a great humility to actually express, like, no, this event happened with this line and this actual person.
And when you
So
hear the line, you go, "Oh my God, this is fantastic!" And later on, the focus puller came up to me and said, when he's asking if Sherlock Holmes was ever entered in the United States, they've got this teletype machine. He said, I could program this to say no, he wasn't. And I said, great, let's do that. So
right.
I kept doing it.
What was the line that was repeated?
I'll tell you the line. The line for those of you poor benighted people who are unfamiliar with Time After Time, this is a story. It's 5 movies rolled into one. It's a romance. It's a comedy. It's science fiction. It's a thriller. And it is a rather mordant social commentary. And all these 5 strands proceed organically from the premise. And I should add right away that I didn't make up this story. I would never have come up with this in a gazillion years. A guy named Carl Alexander, who was at the University of Iowa when I was there, approached me after the 7% solution was on the bestseller list and said, I'm writing a novel that's kind of inspired by your novel. Could you read it and give me your thoughts? He had 65 pages and an outline. And to, telescope this part of the thing, I read what I thought was absolutely a brilliant concept. I thought it was more a movie than a novel, but and it took me like 3 months to wake up at 4 a.m. and go, you're an idiot. Option his book. All right. So I optioned the 65 pages and then I wrote what I thought it should be. Then I gave him the script and I said, here, help yourself. Because I figure if he got his book published, that would be good.
Wow.
Anyway, having, explained all the background, the 5 ideas, the 5 strands of the movie proceed from the idea that the young H.G. Wells has not only going to write a novel about the time machine, but has actually invented a time machine, which he hasn't quite worked up the nerve to use before Jack the Ripper escapes from the cops into the future in his time machine. And Jack the Ripper has a kind of a secret identity as a Harley Street surgeon, which is Wells thinks this is his friend. And only in the opening do we learn that he's a monster. And Wells, believing that he is unleashed a homicidal maniac on the socialist utopia he is so convinced will come in the latter part of the 20th century, feels it incumbent upon him to go after Jack the Ripper. So they wind up in 1979, 2 Victorian characters running around in a world where the audience sees everything from their point of view, which is to say, it's science fiction. Airplanes, miniskirts, it doesn't matter. Rock and roll. And Yes, there's a girl who gets mixed up in the middle of it, and Wells and the Ripper have very different ideas about what kind of world they've landed in. And as the Ripper says at one point to H.G. Wells, 90 years ago, I was a freak. Today, I'm an amateur.
That's a great
Such-
line.
In light of this past week's events,
Such a powerful.
he's more timely than ever. Anyway,
Yeah.
at the beginning of the movie, they're playing chess. And the Ripper always wins. He's not a Ripper at that point. He's a Harley Street surgeon. And Wells says, how does he do it? And the Ripper says, I know how he thinks. And Wells says, one day I'm going to win. And he says, yes, when you learn how I think. So later, when the cops have cleared out and the Ripper has disappeared, no one knows where he went. My original line was, the landlady is saying, well, he couldn't have gotten out the front. He couldn't have. And Wells says, wow. And he says a line, which I won't tell you till later. And the guy comes down and says, that's the wrong line. And I said, what should the line be? He goes, when you learn how I think.
All right.
And I went, that's so much better. It's so much better. So we went and filmed that. And my line was something like, under my very nose.
Okay.
Which,
You know that.
given Malcolm's nose, was a particularly unfelicitous under my very nose. It was just totally banal, stupid. And when you learn how I think, is so much better.
Now, I have a question. This was your first outing as a director, and what were your influences, and were you conscious of picking and choosing influences that you wanted to pay homage to or express in this film? Because in the opening there was something that struck me so strongly, and I want to know if I'm on the right track with it.
Do you want to lead with that, or
No, I want to hear from you first, so I don't humiliate myself.
Well, first of all, I have to say that asking people about their influences is almost a problematic undertaking, for the simple reason that I think a lot of people may not be consciously aware of what is influencing them half the time. They may also want to present themselves in a certain light. You might want to say, oh, yes, I was terribly influenced by the films of Akira Kurosawa, whereas it was really more like Mr. Magoo.
Right.
But that doesn't sound so cool. Or, as I say, there may be influences of which you are unaware, that you have absorbed. I can tell you.
I know that's true, because one time Dad had an interview with somebody, and after the interview, I said to him, "How was the interview?" And he said, "It was really stupid. It was the guy was asking me all kinds of stupid questions." And I said, "Like what?" And he said, "Oh, he was talking about the kinds of roles I take, and I don't, and the kinds of characters I play. I don't play a particular kind of character. That's a load of crap." And I said, "You do play a particular kind of character." And he said, "I do?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "You do?" He said, "What is that?" And I said, "You play the guy who everybody thinks is crazy, because you're the only sane person in a crazy world." And he stopped for a second. He was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I do play that guy all the time."
He's Yossarian.
Yeah, but so that's to your point, that the influences and the things that are driving him are somewhat subconscious.
So, first of all, I think that a lot of influences, and probably a lot of my influences, are subconscious. And I've got to also prune what might sound cool or impressive to sight, which may not be true, but may simply sound good. The one movie influence that I was definitely conscious of was a movie I've seen once in my life and can barely remember. I saw it at the University of Iowa. It's by Jean-Luc Godard. It was called Alphaville.
Mm-hmm.
And Alphaville is a sci-fi story in which everything is the same as now, except it all has sci-fi names. So somebody says, hand me that communicator, and they hand him a book. So it's just different labels for things. And when I read Carl's 65 pages and thought, well, this is a visual idea more than it is, to my way of thinking, a literary idea. This is two guys in Victorian outfits running around modern day, wherever we put it. That shouldn't be too expensive. P.S. maybe they'll let me direct it if I tie my directing to selling the script. So Alphaville, which starred an American actor named Eddie Constantine, who made a lot of films in France. I don't remember the movie. I just remember that conceit. Within that, I'm sure I absorbed or recapped a lot of other movies and a lot of books and so forth. I'll give you another influence, which was the time machine, the actual time machine in the movie. And I think
I think we can see a photograph of that.
There.
Yeah, there it is.
So
Okay.
beautiful.
It was designed by a man named Ed Carfagno, who was a very well-known production designer. And when I was a kid, I was a big Jules Verne fan. I suppose I still am, but when I don't know how old I was, 1954, they released the Walt Disney, what I still think is the best movie Walt Disney ever made, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with James Mason as the best Nemo.
Oh, yeah.
Kirk Douglas, Peter Lorre, and Paul Lukash as Professor Aronnax. And that movie was about a submarine called the Nautilus, which is mistaken for a sea monster. And I saw that movie so many times. I think they dumped me in the movie theater and forgot about me for 3 days. And at the end of that time, I had bonded with the Nautilus as the mother ship. The Nautilus in that movie was designed by a man who never got credit for it, whose name was Harper Goff, Goff. And he went on to design the Vikings, and he did get credit for the Vikings. And he said to Walt Disney, in the novel, Verne describes the Nautilus as looking like a cigar. No one's going to want to look at a cigar for 2 hours in a movie. On the other hand, it is mistaken for a sea monster. Let me design something that tries to combine those things. So he created the Nautilus, this iconic piece of steampunk, maybe the first steampunk. And I just loved that. I wanted to live inside it. So when it came time to design my time machine, I showed the Nautilus to Ed Carfagno, and I said, give me something that looks like this. So that's another influence.
I have to say, it's got so many things I love about it, this movie, and that the fans of this movie I know are legion. But one of the things I think is a magic act that you pull off that I haven't really necessarily heard discussed is that I never for 1 second don't believe that H.G. Wells built a time machine in his basement. Like it is in any other movie something I think I'd stop and go, wait a minute. Well, hold on a second. How did he do it? Where, like, let's see a little more of that. And you created such an immediate tone for this film the minute it starts, and the minute then we get into that that chamber where they're playing chess and talking, and these elegant men are discussing. You managed to create a world where I don't question it for a second, and I think that's kind of a real testimony to the assurance of tone that you had, which to me is the magic act of what you did as a first-time director. Having done a little bit myself, I know how that's the hard part, really. I mean, you just managed to create a flavor that, and it lasts through the whole movie. So, uh,
Well, thank you. I guess I was at a film festival recently and somebody was discussing my films, and I was kind of surprised and interested to hear them talk about how heavy they are on the characters, how the what this man called a kind of humanistic theme that
yes,
was running through it. And so I guess I always approached all of these people, all no matter what I'm writing about, as if they were real people, not as though they were superheroes or archetypes or comic books or camp. Um, Having said that, I don't know why the movie works as well as it does. I think movies are like souffles.
mm,
They either rise or they don't, and you never quite know why. And the fact that I've made a number of movies that seem to have stood the test of time and they last. I've also made a couple of stinkers. And if there were a tried and true formula, I guess, they'd all be souffles that rose.
sure.
I think part of what makes this all work for me, though, is in terms of the tone that Tony was talking about. It harkens back to me to um, in terms of the science that's discussed at the beginning that we buy. The way it's presented is very much like in the Frankenstein movies. We did this and we did that, and it's this new science we've discovered, and it works, and we just buy it because we're back in that time. We're not looking at it through the scientific eyes that we'd have today. We're looking at it through the Victorian Edwardian view of science, and this idea that new things are being discovered and anything is possible. And somewhat related to that is that the beginning of the movie to me felt, when it started, and this is what I was wondering, partly if it was a conscious choice. Tony and I had just a couple of months ago done a run of Hammer horror movies, and the beginning of the movie, in terms of the color palette, the titles, the music, I thought, oh my God, it's a Hammer. We're back in that world. It's a Hammer horror. And was that a conscious um, emulation of that style for the very beginning to bring us into that old world?
I would say semi-conscious. I wouldn't say I was.
That's not to say that the movie is a Hammer horror film
No,
at
no, I
all.
understand. I understand what you're saying. Um, I was inventing a Victorian world, and perhaps my view of that world was, you should pardon the pun, colored by the Hammer movies. But I never thought about it. I think I never thought about it at the time. I just thought this was a scary, fog-bound London streets,
Right.
somehow in the East End, and yet close enough to where Wells lived that he could
Right.
see
Yeah,
the
part of
place it was. I didn't want to show any actual violence in the movie. This is part of a larger theory, which is that works of art, with the exception of movies, tend to work best when they leave things out. Paintings don't move. Music has no intellectual content. Words are just code on a page. In each of these cases, it is the imaginative participation of the viewer, the listener, the reader, that supplies the missing ingredient. Movies alone have the hideous capacity to do everything for you. And in doing so, they lock you out. We call it eye candy, but candy is not good for you. You're talking to the man who fell asleep in both versions of Blade Runner. The movie was, every frame was so perfect that my imagination had nothing to contribute. And horror movies understand this very well. Going back to Hammer for a moment, when you see somebody staring at the camera and their eyes widen in fear, and you don't know what it is they are seeing, that's cool. Then you're drawn in. And I remember watching the Woody Allen movie Manhattan, and they're at the Museum of Modern Art, and they see somebody that she knows behind a panel of paintings, and they're saying, "My God, what are you doing here? This is so amazing." And you're going, "Who is it? Who is it?" He took his time before the guy steps out from behind that panel, and your imagination has been evoked. Once I see the guy get shot or stabbed, I know it's hamburger meat. I know it's ketchup or whatever it is. And in that sense, I go, "Oh, this is pretend." But if you don't show it, if you just hear the rip of a knife going through something and her eyes start to widen, give you another influence.
I think we have that clip. I think we have that clip, actually. Do we have
Oh,
that?
do we? If we have it, let's take a look.
I think we have briefly that clip of the first
That's lovely.
That was it.
It also, what you're talking about also relates to one of my favorite shots in the movie, the door handle cam.
Yeah, I had them build a gigantic doorknob.
How big was it?
Oh, it was like this.
It just blew my mind, that shot. I was like, I can't believe he's put in a door POV.
It's interesting because I hadn't directed a movie. I had directed a lot of plays, and I
was going to ask you that.
I've worked with actors. I had tried to be an actor, and I had directed a lot of radio plays. I directed a play a week on the radio, and so that part I was very confident about. The camera, much less so. So I started off shooting things very conventionally. And then as we got further and deeper into it, I started to get bolder in my choices. And the doorknob, Paul Lohman, who shot Nashville, among other things, looked at that thing and he said, "Meyer, you go too far."
I don't think so at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
I adore that.
I think we were all, pleasantly thrilled by sort of the way this turned out. Again, like a souffle, and you go, "My God, this is 5 movies rolled into one, and they seamlessly kind of flow into each other, and it's sort of idiot's luck." But everybody who worked on it, I think without exception, wanted to be working on it, really liked it, and was sort of in love with the script. And I think the script is probably way stronger than my direction, because I, barely knew what I was doing. But as long as the performances were good and the picture was in focus, the screenplay kind of did the rest. The other thing I want to mention, because you alluded to it, was the music. The music was by a Hungarian composer named Miklos Rozsa, who wrote at least 100 movies. His career, once he came to America during the war, was almost exclusively at MGM. He wrote Knights of the Round Table. He wrote El Cid, The Asphalt Jungle, King of Kings, Ivanhoe, Plymouth Adventure, Brute Force. Went on and on and on. Did Warner Brothers movies too for Mark Hellinger. And he wrote The Thief of Baghdad, the one with Sabu.
Oh my God.
It's one of our dad's favorite movies.
Yeah, we were raised on that movie.
Yep.
Well, it's the same composer. That's Mickey. And when it came time to choose a composer for the film, I said, gee, this is about a 19th century man wandering around in the late 20th century. I think the music should reflect his point of view. And any rock and roll that you hear should be perceived as another sound effect. So the music is sort of the Wells thing. And I was thinking, so it's going to be a symphonic score, and it should be somebody who has a kind of gift for fantasy to do that time travel thing. And we can talk about the way I went about the time travel thing, because that's another sort of
One of my favorite things in the movie. I love. Yeah.
Well, basically, I didn't think I knew enough, to compete with George Pal's time travel sequences in The Time Machine. And also, if I did, it would be just the same, even if it was kind of anywhere near as visiting. And so I thought, what if I could turn the movie theater into a radio? Because no one knows what time travel is, but you can certainly recognize sounds. What about Enrico Caruso singing, a horse clip-clop, an air raid siren, the Rolling Stones, whatever. So I thought, okay, we just need a series of flashing lights and a kind of forward motion, forward momentum kind of things that you're sort of moving, and then put in all these different voices and sound effects that are getting you to use your imagination to feel that you are traveling through time as you overhear these snippets. And so that's how that evolved, and that's how I wound up casting Miklos Rozsa to write the music, because he lent it that whole Victorian fantastic musical accompaniment.
It's a great score. I mean, it truly is. I was just watching the film again with some of the director's commentary that you've done on the DVD, and the hearing the music again, I was really struck. I think it's one of his best scores too. I mean, it's really fantastic stuff.
He's pretty consistent, Mickey.
You're very, you're I think you're very maybe a little too humble about the visual style of the movie. I really think it is got an elegant and spare style, and it reminds me of some of my favorite filmmakers, like Howard Hawks, who notoriously kept it very simple and very kind of not too complicated, deceptively so. And I think you made a reference to not one of the things you said in the commentary anyway was that you felt maybe you didn't get enough coverage, that you could have had more close-ups or insert shots.
A couple of places.
I don't know if I thought that or not. I didn't miss them when I saw the movie. When I heard you mention it, I thought, okay, well, maybe if you're worried about reinforcing detail, but something about shooting without a lot of coverage like that made me so assured that we were just on this ride together, that there wasn't any patronizing to the audience. You really trusted us to follow this thing on its very straight ahead visual level. And I really appreciated that so much this time, because of how movies like this have gotten so bogged down in not just the visual flourish, or the CGI effects, but in the description of the time travel, for instance, or in the mechanics of that being so the point. And watching this film that looked like it could have been, it could have been shot the same day that Bullet was shot, very straight ahead, very much like, no, this is modern day. We're not, there's no ornateness to it. I think it sells the fantasy so much, you know?
Well, I'll only interject number one that artists are not the best judges of their own work, for sure. And what's more, artists lose all proprietary authority over their creations when they're finished. Artists are people who put messages in bottles, and once it's finished, you throw the bottle out there somewhere and hope that somebody finds it and opens it up and sees what's inside. But you're not going to be there when it happens.
Right.
Looking over their shoulder and saying, "No, that's not gum, that's gun. You know, I wish I'd gotten a close up of it." Whatever.
Right.
You just sort of hope for the best. So I'm partial to the movie, and certainly my partiality has been reinforced by the world's affection for the film.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's fair to say that for directors and maybe others, watching your movie is like looking at sort of home movies of your life.
Mm.
There are things that I watched David Lean being interviewed when I lived in London, and they were talking about the end of the bridge on the River Kwai, and the interviewer said, "Oh, I love that moment when the Colonel Nicholson's the doctor after the end says madness."
Right.
Madness. And David Lean says, "I hate that moment." And we're all going, "Okay."
What?
And he says, "Yes, why do you hate the moment?" And he says, "Because the moment we finished the close-up of James Donnell saying his line, Sam Spiegel put him on a plane out of Ceylon back to London, and it's a double who walks away from the camera. And David Lean didn't like the way the double swung his arms."
Wow.
Example number 2. I get to meet Paul Henry. I met Paul.
That's heavy.
It got heavier. We're standing on Wilshire Boulevard outside the Academy Theater. Someone introduces me, and I say, "Mr. Henry, I've loved you in a million movies, but I've got to tell you, when you tell the band to play La Marseillaise, I fall to pieces." And he goes, "I hate that moment." And
Wow.
And I go, "What?"
Oh my God.
He says, I said, "Well, why do you hate the moment?" And he said, "Because the moment I tell them to play La Marseillaise, the band all goes like this." And I say to Cortege, the director, I said, what are they looking at?" He says, "Oh, we'll cut to a shot of Rick on the stairs giving him the high sign it's okay to play." And Paul Henry, getting angrier and angrier in the afternoon sunshine on Wilshire Boulevard, says, "Wait a minute. I'm Victor Laszlo. I'm leader of the resistance in the free world, and I can't get the band in the saloon at the ass end of nowhere to play the Marseillaise without the barkeep?
Oh, that's
It's
great.
ridiculous."
That's
And
so
Cortez
funny.
says, "Yeah, but then, bogey doesn't have anything to do with this." "It's not my problem whether bogey has anything to do with the scene." And I'm like hoping for an earthquake.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Those are great examples, because they are so they're just so, it shows you how personal this stuff is, and you
Okay,
just
well-
can't.
Well, at the risk of incurring your wrath, then, can I have the temerity to pull up some of my favorite moments of the film and ask you why you hate them?
Or not, as the case may be.
Or not, as the case may be. Because my favorite moments in the movie, they a lot of them revolve around, I feel like this movie has such an essential belief in, and you say it clearly, in love and in humanity as being the reason to go on. But there's this great moment where Malcolm McDowell, where H.G. Wells says, play the clip, Elia, you know the one I'm talking about. Malcolm McDowell says his line, and Mary Steenburgen replies with something else.
Every age is the same.
Oh, that was only part of it.
Every age is the same. It's only love that makes any of them bearable.
Okay, but then there's another clip where she has
The first man to raise a fist is the man who's run out of ideas.
I love you.
So good.
the fact that he's being philosophical and so serious, and her response is, "I love you," just encapsulated.
Again, this is just, my opinion, but I think she loves the man who believes that.
Yeah.
The first man to raise a fist is the man who has run out of ideas. I don't know where I heard that, but it stuck with me.
And then the moment at the end, that is throughout the movie, it seems to me that Dr. Stevenson, aka Jack the Ripper, devolves. As he finds his element, he's in this new world, which is the world that he belongs in. He decompensates. He falls apart. He's very together at the beginning.
Yes, he is.
And he decompensates throughout the whole movie, and then in the last moment, his last moment, he seems, unless I'm misinterpreting it, he regains his humanity.
Well, two things are happening. One is that there's another influence that's from the third man, and it's the moment where Harry Lime realizes in his endless chase through the sewers of Vienna that he's reached the end of the line and he's going to be shot, and he gives a little nod to Holly Martins to shoot him. It's a tiny little nod. And I lifted that tiny little nod and I gave it to Jack the Ripper at the end. And that was an outgrowth of an earlier moment in the same scene, which we were shooting on a soundstage. And David Warner, who plays the Ripper, and Dr. Stevenson, said to me, "I'm confused. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to play this final confrontation with Wells." And I don't know where I got this from, but I just said, "You're exhausted." And he goes, oh, stop. Don't say anymore. I know what to do. And that's where the exhaustion came from. And that's where the nod followed on that.
It's a brilliant direction. For anybody out there listening and thinking about direction and directing actors in particular, which is, I don't even know if people do that anymore or if we're allowed to, but one of the things I took away from this in this viewing was just, your touch with actors here. Every single role is perfectly detailed, just enough to get them to tell story and to create a believable moment in a character. I think every actor in this is given an opportunity to do something fun or individualistic. And, I heard you in the director's commentary say that note about play exhaustion. That simple, concise thing really made that ending performance, that ending scene of his, incredible on multiple levels, and you got there very quickly. And it reminded me of something that he was also doing in the movie, and I don't know if it was on purpose or if you worked with him to get there or how David Warner works. He's a favorite of mine. I've always really thought he's, one of the best actors for me. But he does something in it to make that character even more terrifying than he would be without this. And I sense from him a little bit of self-awareness and almost fear of himself, or there's an aspect of this journey that he's on, this dark journey that he's on, that seems to be almost that he's aware that it's out of his control, and that makes him excited but nervous. There's that, and there's a weird smile thing he does with a couple of his victims where he's shy with them or appears like a little boy. He smiles at this dancer who comes up to him at the nightclub, and it's the most chilling thing, and it's psychologically deep. And I'm wondering if this is resonating with you, if you saw him do this, if this was conscious.
Well, I have a good memory, but it's not a perfect memory, and I've found that out the hard way a couple times. What I remember was that the Ripper carries a watch, and the watch plays a little tune, which I also chose. It's part of the Chanson d'Auvergne series, which has been sung by a million sopranos. And it's a little sort of kind of a lilting lullaby. It's the most innocent sounding thing.
Yeah,
you could
and it's
possibly-
haunting in the context. Yeah,
very, very, very innocent sounding. And the watch has a picture of a woman in it. And that woman is clearly from a previous generation.
mm-hmm.
My mother was rather an atrocious woman in her way, but her many failings did not include raising mentally deficient.
That's
Great line.
Yeah,
My ma didn't raise no stupid children.
Yeah.
And somehow I think for David, the watch, the tune, the image, and his clearly orgasmic release after he's killed the first prostitute, he is in the grip of some kind of sexual mania that can only be fulfilled one way. And all the rest leading up to it, whatever tentativeness, that all came from David, to my recollection.
Interesting about that. That watch is so powerful. That image of the woman who we assume would be his mother. It looks like that would be, who would be from another earlier time. It's like this tiny little Hitchcock mom that is just in a photograph, but it really does have this layered effect. And I remember being really impacted by that depiction of evil. I knew about the Ripper. I'd heard about him, I guess, but as a kid, when I saw the movie the first time, it was really the first time. And you may or may not love this part about the movie, because it actually was a doorway for me to love kind of horror movies and other stuff, which I've gotten a lot out of. And I have to say, your approach to it, I admire very much. I love the lack of gore here. I love the lack of it. I also think that when you use it, though, it has tremendous impact, because there are a couple of things you show here that are pretty shocking. Very briefly,
The
Yes.
blood tear is very.
Well, that was the other influence. I was crazy about this television series called I, Claudius.
oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
With Derek Jacobi as
Who
Claudius.
you initially wanted to play.
Yeah, except
H.G.
nobody
Wells.
at Warner Brothers had ever seen I, Claudius, so they didn't
Right.
know who Derek Jacobi was. Anyway, there's a moment in I, Claudius, the only time I've ever screamed in front of a television set, where the Empress Messalina gets her head chopped off. And this soldier yanks her up by the hair, and his sword arm goes back, and the camera spins around.
Oh, okay.
And we're out. And I took that, and then I added the blood tear. The whole history of art, any kind of art, as near as I can figure out, there's a history of cut and paste. You add to it. Michael Chabon says that all fiction is fan fiction. What is the Odyssey? The Odyssey is a spin-off from the Iliad.
Right.
And people have been adding and spinning, and that's why I hate the term cultural appropriation or cultural misappropriation. Everything is an appropriation.
Right.
It just is. And getting mad at George Gershwin for writing Porgy and Bess is silly. Or William Styron for writing the Confessions of Nat Turner is silly and wrong. And how dare Flaubert write Madame Bovary? How dare you try to write a woman? It's ridiculous. All art is cut and paste.
The way that you appropriated, though, here is so unique. I remember feeling that these movies were, even at the time, were a kind of the new face of fantasy. I remember, and I was a little young to see this movie. I think when I saw, I mean, I really felt like, oh, between this and then 7%, of course, had a similar magic quality to it, where your head explodes just because the ideas are just so fun, so followable. We do want to see these characters in this journey no matter what. And I don't know where Matthew went. I apparently disgusted him. I said something that he didn't like, but
And you went to find the picture of the Nautilus that somebody said they had found.
I'm curious.
There,
Oh,
there.
wow, yeah.
So
Oh,
now,
that's
if
great.
you put that back to back with the time machine, you'll see
Yeah,
the slight resemblance.
it's
Slight.
just beautiful. How involved were you? I mean, did you give them some adjectives and told them watch 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or did you go through a lot of drafts of drawings and
No,
and
I began by saying look at the
right?
Nautilus from the movie, and then I don't remember the details, but I'm sure we riffed on what he had seen, and he showed me some sketches and so forth.
I love the use of the I think it's probably my favorite in any movie, the use of the art expo in San Francisco, the location. um because it's one of the only movies I think that thematically it's been used properly. Otherwise it's just this gorgeous backdrop,
We
but there's
wanted to
something.
have I wanted to have fog at the end so that the movie opened
Oh,
and closed with fog,
okay.
but there was too much wind and it
You
was just
couldn't stay in there, right?
couldn't stay there. Yeah.
There's something about, I mean, we've seen it in a lot of cop movies and and it moved out San Francisco, it's there, but having this the site of the World's Fair, which is all about the future, and him, I guess H.G. Wells was born right around, or would have been alive for the first World's Fair, right? It was like 1850s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he would have known about it, but the idea that this kind of architectural representation of the future and time travel, I just love that detail about it. How now I'd love to talk about a couple of other things. I'd like to talk about a movie that I just heard about and found a little bit of, which is called The Invasion of the Bee Women. Was this your first screenplay? And if so, how did you make the jump from theater to working in like fantasy sci-fi movies? That's such an interesting jump.
Well, this was an extremely disagreeable experience, and one which I tend not to care to discuss.
Oh, I'm sorry to bring it up. Then I didn't mean to.
The only thing I will say about it, because I think it got pretty ruined, was that the producers said to me, "We want to make a horror movie in which the men and not the women, for a change, are victims." And I said, "Great."
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, "Oh, what a good thing." And then I came up with a movie which I called The Honey Factor.
Okay.
And you can see how much more elegant it
Okay.
was.
I can see why you're mad. I can see why you're upset. I can see why you're upset.
Great, I'll just kill myself.
So my question really wasn't about that film so much as if your background was in theater initially. When did you know that you wanted to go into making films in addition to being in theater and writing novels?
As I said, I was a Jules Verne fan. And for my 11th birthday, my father took me to the Rivoli Theater to see the Mike Todd Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
My life changed. I was Saul of Tarsus, struck blind on the road to Damascus. And there was a program that you could buy that came with the movie. $2. I still have it. It's out of reach, or I'd show it to you. And it's all about the making of Around the World in 80 Days. And there was an article in it. This was Mike Todd's first, and it turned out his only movie as a film producer. And the article was called, "You Too Can Make a Motion Picture. No Previous Experience Necessary."
Wow.
11 years old. And I thought, yes, I can make a motion picture. No previous experience necessary. Pop, would you help me? We have an 8mm wind-up Revere camera. I want to make a movie. And the movie I wanted to make, not The Sharpest Knife in the Drawer, was the movie I had just seen. I was going to be Phileas Fogg. My best friend, who grew up to edit my movies, was Passepartout. And we spent weekends and school vacations and summer holidays making this movie. So I was a filmmaker from the get-go. I just had never directed a 35mm feature.
My first film when I was 9 years old, right around when 7% happened, was a remake of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, in which I played the Hunchback. So I feel you.
Quasimodo.
I feel you there. Yeah, I was bit by that same bug.
And he was wonderful, I might add.
Please tell me more.
My theory is that childhood experiences, whether of events or people or art, tend to imprint themselves with the most force on people growing up. You never forget. For some people, it's Bambi. For other people, it's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or whatever it is. For me, it was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then Around the World in 80 Days. That sealed my fate. Plus the fact that once I learned how to read, I couldn't stop. The Three Musketeers, The Count of Monte Cristo, Edgar Allan, I just couldn't get enough, and still can't. I think Cervantes was the last guy who could claim to have read every book.
Huh.
It was said that if he would see a scrap of paper on the street, he had to bend down, pick it up.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I'm curious. You're born in New York City. You're from New York. Did you get the theater bug early, or was that in college? Or
No, New York post-war, when I grew up, was a fairy tale place for a middle-class family. There used to be middle-class people. My dad was a doctor. I got taken to the ballet. I got taken to the opera. I got taken to musicals. I got taken to theater. What was the result? I'm an opera, ballet, musical, theater fool. I'm an opera fool. I just soaked it all up. I thought, this is great.
So we're a couple of silly questions, or things that I noticed. There's one shot. You mentioned that it takes place in the San Francisco of Bullets, or Tony mentioned that. There's one shot in the taxi cab.
It's a steal.
It's right out of. It's exactly from Bullet. Steve
Jaffe, my producer, shot it.
Okay, and that was intentional. That's great to know. Also, the Sherlock Holmes, of course, brought up to me, of course, that you had just made 7% Solution. So the references to Sherlock Holmes seemed very apt.
Can I just say also,
they were logically apt. It never occurred to him that Sherlock Holmes.
That's what made me laugh. That made me laugh so hard that he'd think, of course, who would know Sherlock Holmes?
Right.
I just love that.
Exactly. And then also, we had been in San Francisco just a few years before this was shot for Freebie and the Bean. And there's a gunfight between those elevators in the Hyatt Hotel in Freebie and the Bean.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, where the two elevators are going at the same time, and they're shooting at each other in the elevators.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, so I didn't know if that was intentional.
No, what happened was when they showed me that hotel, the Hyatt Hotel on Drum Street, which won all these architectural prizes. I said, gee, this looks exactly like the huge set in that gigantic British movie, The Shape of Things to Come. H.G. Wells. If you look at it, you look at that set, it looks like the Hyatt. And the lady showing me around said, well, it's interesting you say that because that was the architect's favorite movie.
Oh, wow.
So it really was an H.G. Wells hotel.
That's incredible.
That's crazy. That is crazy. I also want to give a shout out to an actor who I've heard Dad talk about so much, and I've never known how to pronounce his name when I see it. Dad always pronounced it Joe Mahar. It looks like it's spelled Mayer or
yeah.
But he's spectacular in this.
If you gentlemen will accompany me, I'll see that you all reach your home safely.
Yes, just wonderful. Dad worked with him in a play called A with Dustin Hoffman, and Mom as well.
I want to give while we're talking about it, small roles in this, a shout out to Charles Cioffi, who plays the detective, who is just fantastic, I think, in this small role. Your part when we recast.
I saw him in Clute, and I wanted to.
Of course, right. Wow.
That's who I'm playing when we recast?
we always recast the movies, Nicholas. We at the end of it, Matthew and I go, well, if we were doing it today, who would be in it? And that's Matthew. We cast ourselves, and Matthew would get to play the detective. Would get to play Cioffi. Okay. That's just my one man's opinion.
I think you'd be the cab driver.
No, I know exactly who I am. I'm the guy. I'm the guy standing in front of him at the line of McDonald's. It's like, I'd like a cheeseburger, please. That's my part, which I'm very grateful to have. I want to just go through a couple of things that I usually, Matthew and I just yell things that we love about the movie at each other. And I'd like to do that while you're on the air, just because there's so many. I just love Colts Small Rams as a headline that confuses him in the future. I couldn't think of a more appropriate confusing headline. His reaction to fries being pommes frites. I could watch that every day of my life. I think it's fantastic. The scene in the hotel between the two of them when they meet is just gold. It is fantastic. And subtle stuff going on there when David Warner is reclining on that gory looking bedspread. It is so chilling. So yeah, there's some touches there visually that are subtle and great. Spoon in the garbage disposal. Whose idea was that? Was that yours or Malcolm's?
Don't remember. It could very well have been Malcolm's, but
it's great.
That's a great prep for it for sure.
Her wine glass into the pasta?
Yeah, nobody ever notices that. Good.
Oh, it's great.
It's interesting. There were things I had to cut out of this movie because I didn't film them right. Some of which wound up in Star Trek 6.
Really?
Not 6, 4.
You mean as gags that you were able to do later? Okay.
Yeah, because it's basically the same story. In Star Trek 4 is another time travel story.
Yeah, right.
And I said, do they have to go to San Francisco? I did time travel.
It's the same place, yeah.
So I would recycle stuff. You mentioned something else that brought back a memory. It wasn't the garbage. Oh, it was the Mickey Mouse phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Mary says to me, she would never have this phone. This phone is terrible.
Her character would never have it. Yeah.
And it's all I can do to get through the day. And I said, well, listen, what can I tell you? I need the phone. It's perfect for the,
So it meant something to you thematically. You needed it there for.
Well, it was just this silly anachronistic thing that was going to completely befuddle him. And she kind of stomped off. And then she came back a few minutes later and she said, I'll make it work for you. And so when the phone rings and he goes, what's that? And she goes to pick it up and she goes, the phone. She goes, Ted's idea.
So that was her. That was her after a day of thinking about it. That's great.
That's how she made it work.
What a wonderful
Running
performance.
out of voice, guys.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll just hit you with a couple of things that I adored. The spinning shadow of the lamp when he's dejected and the time machine is gone and he doesn't know what to do, and the lamp, the he sees the shadow on the floor moving because of the lamp first. I loved that. I love the moment with the glasses where his glasses
Oh,
are broken and he
yes.
realizes he can
He
get his
has
own
them in
glasses
his.
out of the desk.
Oh, it's that's just the greatest.
The
And the
lesson, the way that came about, because I have a daughter who's about to direct a movie, and she's talking about cutting the tediousness of cutting the budget. And I said, it can be fun if you look for ways to skin the cat. So when I was writing the movie and making the movie, I thought we got Wells in his apartment, and we got a museum exhibit in London. These are lots of sets. And I thought, wouldn't it be, hey, wait, what if we just transplanted everything from his
So smart.
London apartment and turned it into the museum exhibit? And wouldn't it be
That's great.
cool if he forgot something at home
Yeah.
that he was able to retrieve from so that's how that came about.
It's so delightful.
Right.
I love that moment.
And
with all my
also
heart.
the endless foot chase back and forth on the bridges.
with
Where
David Warner, who couldn't run.
really,
So,
oh,
Did he have broken ankles or something? He had.
he had. That's a long story, but anyway, he couldn't run.
But they weren't freshly broken ankles. I mean,
No.
they were. It was an old injury, I'm assuming, because he was running a little bit. Yeah.
Well, we used doubles, we used all kind of things, but again, I was just trying to get through it.
well, what a wonderful job. Listen, we don't want to take up any more of your time, your voices. Yes.
We could clearly talk about this movie for
Yeah.
a much longer time. The feeling is genuine, Nicholas, and the feeling for other stuff you've done is just as genuine. So this is just part of why we
believe you, and I'm not BSing when I say that listening to your enthusiasm and the specificity with which you cite things from the movie is enormously touching and meaningful to me. I know I'm not alone when artists, I said, throw bottles out there. You don't know who's going to find, you don't know what they're going to make of it. And so when people write me letters or whatever, something like this, to say that it makes my day doesn't really quite cover it.
Well, that's it's amazing to hear you say that. It's very genuine from both of us. And before you go, I also want to just say that you may not have known that you made an impact on me personally as well, because I was when I was on the set for 7% Solution, I was a little kid, 10 years old or so. I was already wanted to be a filmmaker. I already wanted to do this and be a storyteller and I didn't know how yet, but you were one of the first people who I was old enough to be aware of as a young person. So you were young then, but older than me, but I looked up to you then as somebody who was like, I want to do kind of what he's doing. I couldn't even put it together, but because you were nice to me and because you didn't patronize me as a little kid, as some people do on movie sets, it meant a lot. And so I'm very happy to have an opportunity to tell you much later that you made a big impact on me.
And I want to echo that as well, that there have been Tony and I growing up on sets with Dad, there have been a small handful of people who I encountered in my youth and growing up with Dad on sets who I just always remembered as not only people whose work I admired, but who I remembered as being kind to me, to us back then, and treating us like people rather than as the son of the guy they were working with who was hanging around. And you were one of those people who just made a tremendous impression on me back then.
Well, you were my playmate. We were like, I was like such a kid on this movie. You were the closest person I could talk to.
Well, I remember one particular night in Vienna all night, and they took out this big pot and made Glühwein. Do you remember that night? The hot wine for the spiced wine for the crew on a cold night in Vienna. I've never forgotten that evening.
I cast 2 roles in that movie. I cast Robert Duvall.
Oh,
Wow.
brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant.
And I cast your dad.
Did you really?
Wow.
Yeah, that was my idea.
Wow. That's incredible. Because Duvall is not, I don't, that's not an obvious one, but so brilliant. Such a great
when
choice.
I heard that he wanted to play the role, I went ballistic because I just thought, I'm so trying to get away from Nigel Bruce. I basically hate all Sherlock Holmes movies with 1 or 2 exceptions. Never understood why a genius hangs out with a jerk.
Right.
Watson is a jerk. It didn't make any sense to me. I have to go because I really have no voice, but I would love to continue this,
Well,
when I do.
If you would like to come back, we would love to have you back on the show some other time to talk about another film. It would
Anytime.
be a great honor.
Talk about the Wrath of Khan. We can talk about
That would be great.
Would love to.
That would be great.
All right. We'll let you go. I'll pop you out, but thank you so much for joining us.
Will you say hello to your folks for me?
We'll
Absolutely.
For sure.
We'll do.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, Nicholas.
Bye-bye.
Wow.
I don't even know what to say.
What a treat.
Fantastic. That was fantastic. He gave us so much.
Yeah.
So much. Fantastic. And boy, like now that he's gone, I can really say how much I love this movie.
I think you said it while he was here too.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's even hard for me to figure out because I loved this movie literally so much as a kid that I was reliving childhood as I watched it again,
Let me ask you a question. Because I watched it yesterday again, and there was something that I remembered so clearly that wasn't in the version that I watched last night, and I was waiting for it at the very end. That I remembered tintypes of her in the closing credits.
You might be thinking of another time travel movie, maybe. But you mean like from her in that time?
That in the closing credits that they had pictures of her as his wife back in time over the and I could have sworn that was at the end of this film when they're describing like what her life went on to be. But maybe
that sounds kind of familiar too to me, but I didn't miss it when I saw this movie. Maybe we're thinking about.
Maybe I'm thinking of Dana Delaney in Tombstone.
Possible.
What happened?
There's been a lot of tintypes in different movies. It could be almost any movie. The only thing I guess I'm sorry I didn't really get a chance to ask Nicholas Meyer was if there was a meeting with Mick Jagger, number one, and two, how happy he was that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
David Warner, Mick Jagger
would have slightly.
I think this worked out.
Slightly different.
I think it worked out.
So we're taking a break for a few weeks.
Oh, we're not done. You haven't given me your recast or any of the other details.
I was too busy this week. I didn't do anything.
I
was horrible. I'm a lazy bad
disappointing person. You're disappointing. I have it worked out. You want to hear mine, or do you just want to hear yours? Because you didn't do it, do you not even care that I did?
I want to hear all of yours.
Okay, here's my recast. I'm gonna say we're gonna go with the Ewan McGregor for H.G. Wells.
Excellent.
I'm gonna say Michael Fassbender for Jack the Ripper.
Okay, I have a different one.
You said you didn't do him. Why are you interrupted? What you said?
Because I realized I do have one for Jack the Ripper.
Oh, who?
Javier Bardem.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's true. I don't know how his British accent is, but We can work on it. He's talented.
He's a talented dude.
I'm saying Jennifer Lawrence for the Mary Steenburgen role.
I'm down with that.
And Giovanni Ribisi as the detective. If he keeps the weight on from
The Offer?
The Offer.
Yeah, and the voice. I
Yeah.
want to hear that voice.
That's it. That's all I got.
That's pretty good.
Thank you for your enthusiasm. What is the ideal way to see this movie?
The ideal way to see this movie is over and over again.
That's true. I would say I would detail that by saying that I think this may be the best like date movie of its time. I can't really imagine
Of which time? 1979 or 1893?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought of that. I really have to recalibrate. I don't know. No, like that's the ideal date movie, don't you think?
Yeah, I did get a little upset about one thing watching this movie.
What's that?
I don't have a time machine and I can't go back and try to date Mary Steenburgen.
Back in 1979.
Yeah. Because I totally fell in love with her.
Well, now that Nicholas Meyer's been on the show, maybe you can talk to him about doing a spinoff where you go back into 1979 while they're making this movie, and you can fight with Malcolm McDowell, who's still alive. He's still around. He could do. That's high concept. Talk about high concept. It's like hot tub time machine meets hot tub time after time machine. I think he might go for it.
Yeah. So what are we doing next? We talked about
what we're doing next is you're leaving me for a whole other life. You want a different life without me.
We're having a little time off.
Yeah.
But then we talked about maybe doing a set when we come back to celebrate brothers. A bunch of movies about brothers, since as brothers we know a little bit about being brothers.
We do. Now that might be too much brotherness for people. People tuning in might be like a little too much brother.
Maybe we could do a series about sisters.
However, let's say we're going to do this, and if people feel strongly, they can contact us through social media or now on the show and say that's a great idea or no.
Our producers want to know if we should show some of the photos of Mr. Meyer on set.
Why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, let's look at a couple of these. There he is. Yep, listening and talking to somebody. That's a good one.
With very cool glasses. I may have had a pair of glasses like that at one time.
I had a sweater like that once. He looks he looks like he was 17 when he was directing this movie. And really 17 years old.
He may have been I mean,
that's just nuts.
And I mean, we didn't talk about this. I'm sure it's a thing he probably may be sick of talking about, but the fact that we get to watch Mary Steenburgen and Malcolm McDowell fall in love in front of us in real time is an amazing part of this movie. It's like,
were they a couple after this, like in real life?
Did you IRL? Are you being funny? Are you being?
Yeah, because she went on to marry Ted Danson.
I don't know what you're talking about, other than that she was married to Malcolm McDowell. They met on this movie. They fell in love and they had kids together.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I only know her as being married to Ted Danson.
Oh, I didn't know she was married to Ted Danson.
Yes.
I knew she was married to Malcolm McDowell because they met on this movie and fell in love during the course of making it. So
we must add detective to your list of accomplishments.
I think somebody's paying attention. So
but maybe my producers will tell me, am I completely crazy? Producers, please tell me.
Remember that
Steenburgen's married to Ted Danson.
I really,
I'm not insane.
You must remember that clip, because that must be played at every time that Matthew is corrected by me. They fell in love while this movie was being shot, and kind of in real time.
I can't blame him. Her, I don't know about, but him, I can't blame.
Wow, okay. He's a charming English fellow.
He doesn't do it. No, I think he's lovely. He's
He doesn't
wonderful.
do it for
Great
you.
actor,
Well, I'm
very
sure he
handsome,
couldn't
but
be happier than that. I'm sure you just made his night, as a matter of fact.
I didn't fall in love
It's
with
one
him.
less thing he's got to worry about is you trying to get him
And
on
our
a date.
producers aren't helping me out here with the Ted Danson angle. They clearly they've given up on me.
They knew it too. Let's face it.
Please help me here. Wasn't Mary Steenburgen married to Ted Danson? And how do you pronounce her last name? Because I'm trying to fudge the pronunciation of Bergman.
I think it's Steenburgen. I think it's
Bergen?
Steenburgen. I think
Bergen. Okay,
but I'm not. I don't know. I had the pleasure of meeting her at one point.
all right.
Very nice.
Because
person.
she and Ted came over to Adams for dinner, I think, one night.
Was that Ted? I thought he was just the chauffeur. I'm confused.
Oh wait, there's something in the private chat. She's married to Ted 5 years after Malcolm. She was married to Ted Danson. Thank God. Married for 10 years to Malcolm.
That's a good long time.
That was a good long time. Did you know that we have a new end screen?
No, but he told me that's no.
We have a new end screen. Do you want to see it?
If you're going to end the show on me, why don't you prepare me?
I don't have. That is not the new end screen, but that was excellent.
That is a great moment. What a great way to kill that guy off. So fantastic.
Do we have any? We have some other great clips from the movie, I think, that we might not have watched. The slap. We have a nice slap. I don't think we watched the slap. I'm
going to tell you the truth.
Yes, I'm going to tell you the truth. What's up, Doc? Gets a nice.
What's up, Doc? I beg your pardon?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. That's.
There's a little brandy in the flask if you need it.
Always offer somebody brandy when they're taking sedatives, and the killer is after them. That's what I say.
Pommes
yeah.
Fries are pommes frites.
A killer is after you. Why don't you take a sedative and have some brandy?
Mm-hmm.
That will help.
Well, it's a very Edwardian thing to do, isn't it?
It is.
One of my favorite lines, I think, perhaps in the whole movie, is Joffrey, the detective, who seriously is looking at. He hears the whole spiel at first, and he goes, "I know." He's like, "I know something will happen, and he's going to kill again." And he just seriously looks at Malcolm McDowell and he goes, "Do you have spiritual powers?" It's great.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So, yes, but we do have a new closing sequence.
Okay.
So maybe it's time to say goodnight and show.
Maybe it is. It's been a long show. It's been an hour and a half.
Yeah. We will see you all, our huge number of fans.
We have fans.
What?
We have fans.
We have fans.
That's lovely.
Absolutely. Probably at the end of June, we'll be back.
Probably at the end of June. I don't like leaving our audience, no matter how small they are, with that kind of an ender. What I want to say is we're taking a little summer hiatus. We have to take a little break because Matthew has an enormous amount of work to get his business off the ground. But
not just my business, my daughter's dance recital, her graduation from high school, all kinds of exciting things like that.
Okay. Well, the other important thing to say is that we will be back in 3 weeks.
I think it'll be 4.
We'll be back in 4 weeks, but we will be back. Not probably.
We will be back. We'll be back in 4 weeks. Folks.
Yes, taking a month.
Every age is the same. It's only love that makes any of them bearable.
Truer words never spoken.
Never spoken. All right. Good night, everybody.
Talking about cocktails that are stylish, movies great or phony, and how Tony should win and Matthew should win a Tony.